All right, so it is 7:04. We are going to get started. So thank you again, everyone, for joining JETAA Chicago's Finding Japan in the Midwest webinar. My name is Gabriel Coronado, and I'm the current president of the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program Alumni Association of Chicago. I was an ALT in Miyazaki Prefecture from 2007 to 2008. For those of you that may be attending one of our events for the first time or are unfamiliar with the program, JET was developed to foster language education and cultural exchange at a grassroots level by sending participants of diverse backgrounds and experiences from all over the world to Japan. Our Alumni Association is an organization dedicated to supporting the JET alumni community in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, as well as cultivating relationships with the greater Japan America community in our region and nationally. I am a native Midwesterner. Outside of my year on JET, I have lived in the city of Chicago my entire life. I even spent my high school and college years studying Japanese literature and the Japanese language at Whitney Young High School and DePaul University, respectively, for all those maybe Chicago people that are in the audience today. I'd always heard that Japan, the Japanese American community in the Midwest share a long history. But if I'm being honest, I feel like my knowledge and awareness of this subject only really scratched the surface. So I could not be more excited for the opportunity to learn about our community's history from our three speakers today, as I believe there is no better way to strengthen our relationships in the present than by understanding our shared history. I do want to thank our philanthropy coordinator, Sheila Burt, for organizing this discussion, USJETAA and Sasakawa USA for their generous grant support, and again, our three speakers for coming forward to share their experiences, and everyone in attendance for spending your evenings with us. With that, I will pass it over to Bahia and Shanti to do an introduction for USJETAA and Sasukawa USA.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Bahia Simons Lane. I'm the Executive Director of the US JET Program Alumni Association, USJETAA. If you're a JET in the audience and you're not yet a member of USJETAA, I hope that you will become one. This is our sixth year supporting this chapter grant program in conjunction with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, and we're really excited to be able to support such a great program as this one. One of the goals of this grant program is to enable the JET alumni chapters to address issues that normally they would not be able to address and hold events that maybe they don't have the capacity or funding to hold. We're very, very excited to learn today about Japan in the Midwest and to hear from the wonderful speakers that you have lined up. That's all from me. I'm going to turn it over to Shanti.
All right, thank you so much, Bahia. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Washington, D.C. My name is Shanti Shoji, Director of Programs at Sasakawa USA. And as Bahia just said, in partnership with USJETAA, Sasakawa is proud to be able to bring funding to these great local groups such as JETAA Chicago that comes up with spectacular ideas on how to better engage with Japan after coming back to the US and learn more and grow in our understanding about that. So we're excited about tonight's program. And a little bit about Sasakawa USA in case you are unaware of who we are. We're a 501c3 non-partisan organization based in Washington, D.C. And our mission is to further engagement and understanding between the US and Japan. We mainly focus on security and diplomacy, but also work in grassroots types of exchanges with things like this. So thank you everyone for coming, and I'm looking forward to the event.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for those remarks, Gabe, Bahia, and Shanti. I am Sheila Burt. I'm the philanthropy coordinator for JETAA Chicago. I wanted to reiterate our thank you to USJETAA and Sasakawa USA for supporting this program. Without their support, this event could not be possible. So thank you very much. And I also wanted to thank all of our officers for making this event possible and helping organizing it. With that, we will have three speakers who will present on very unique topics. And although a central theme is finding Japan in the Midwest, a central heart of it is also community. So no matter where you live, I hope you learn more about the themes of community through all their presentations. There is a program guide that we will be sharing in the link that will be a PDF where you could learn more about all of our speakers. With that, I wanted to introduce our first speaker, Eric Matsunaga. He is a writer, researcher, and martial arts instructor based in Chicago. His investigations into the history of Chicago's Japanese American community have been featured by the Japanese American National Museum, Alphawood Gallery, WBEZ Radio, and the Newberry Library. He was born in Chicago, a descendant of World War II era Nikkei resettlers from California. He manages Ravenswood Shorin-ryu Karate Dojo and curates Windy City Nikkei, bite-sized glimpses of Japanese American Chicago on Instagram and Facebook. Definitely check that out if you have not already. So his presentation will be 30 Years of Lakeview, a virtual tour of Chicago's historic Japantown. We're so grateful to have him, and I know he has done these tours in person, but with COVID, we're very excited that we can do a virtual tour. So thank you, Eric.
Well, first of all, thank you to Sasakawa USA and USJETAA Mini-Grant Program for making this webinar possible for us. And thank you all for having me here. The original tour that we did was in 2019, November, and I led the tour along with Catherine Nagasawa in conjunction with the Chicago JACL's Concha project. I have about 20 minutes here, so I'm just going to jump right in. During and immediately following World War II, Americans of Japanese ancestry flooded Chicago for work and school, as they were either released from incarceration at one of 10 U.S. War Relocation Authority concentration camps or discharged from military service. So prior to World War II, Chicago's ethnic Japanese population numbered roughly 400, and by 1945, there were some 20,000. Instructed by the government to not congregate back into the Japantowns they left behind, programs were instituted to assist relocatees in assimilating to the greater population. With such mass migration, however, this community naturally began building its own support networks in order to acclimate into this new environment. Largely from the West Coast with a smaller contingent from Hawaii, Chicago provided a culture shock for many resettlers. Japanese Americans established social, cultural, and religious institutions, as well as small businesses to serve the burgeoning population. And by the mid-1940s, two distinct Japanese American neighborhoods had formed in Chicago, one on the south side Oakland community near 43rd and Cottage Grove, and another in the near north side at Clark and Division Streets. Regarding the north side community, by the 1960s, urban renewal projects began displacing residents and businesses as old buildings and tenements were demolished in favor of modern high-rises for middle to upper income tenants. Additionally, the Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans born and raised in the United States, craved more spacious accommodations for their growing families. Consequently, a migration of the north side Nikkei community ensued 3 miles further up Clark Street into the Lakeview neighborhood in the vicinity of Wrigley Field. That brought with it many of its businesses and institutions. Many residents of Chicago today would likely tell you that the city never had a Nihonmachi or Japantown. The government did not want the community congregating as such. Despite a lack of formal designation, however, there were a few unofficial neighborhoods of Japanese settlement post-World War II. The last and perhaps largest of these was Lakeview, and its influence lasted the better part of. Populated by many ethnic groups, Japanese Americans were highly visible in terms of their commercial, cultural, and residential presence, particularly along Clark Street and Sheffield Avenue from Belmont to Addison. Although the Nikkei, meaning of Japanese descent, residential presence began dispersing much earlier as many Sansei or third-generation Japanese Americans came of age and largely moved their families either outward toward city limits or into the suburbs, many businesses remained in the neighborhood into the latter half of the 1990s and beyond. Gentrification and changing neighborhood dynamics, coupled with lack of residential and commercial succession, had significantly diminished the area of Nikkei presence. This tour offers a glimpse into a recently bygone era. Although only a handful of historic Nikkei entities still remain as scattered after images of its heyday, no formal designation has ever encouraged the sustenance of this community as a geographic destination, Japanese American culture as one might find on the West Coast, or even in various other ethnic Chicago neighborhoods such as Ukrainian Village or Andersonville, Swedish Town, where ethnic and economic demographics have changed considerably across generations while maintaining the culturally unique footprints that have forged Chicago as a city of neighborhoods. So we begin our tour on the 1000 block of Culture Center. And additional on this block, you would find Harry Omori's dentistry office at 1015 West Belmont. And on the corner building at 1011, we'd find Ben Shikaraishi's optometry office, Gio Yamaguchi's attorney at law office, and the Chicago Japanese American Civic Association Credit Union, all of which moved up from Clark and Division. The Japanese Culture Center at 1016 was established in 1978 by the late Fumio Toyota, a Shin Issei native of Tochigi, Japan. Now, when we say Shin Issei, we're meaning a new immigrant, not of the Japanese migration in the early 1900s, from whom most of us, meaning my family and those that came from the camps, descended. For the past 43 years, it has promoted Japanese culture in the Lakeview community through classes in Japanese language, tea ceremony, flower arranging, calligraphy, brush painting, meditation, various martial arts. Upon Toyota's passing in 2001, the center came under the leadership of his son, Stephen Tatsuo Toyota. So please visit their website and see, I'm not sure how they're doing with the pandemic, but sign up for some classes. They probably have some online classes as well as some limited in-person classes. Next in line is J. Toguri Mercantile Company at 851 West Belmont. Now, Toguri Mercantile, in order to get there from the 1000 block of West Belmont, we'd have to walk down the 900 to 800 blocks. And so we're walking east now, and you can see in the map in the upper left-hand corner, we're going between number 1 and number 2 along Belmont. From the 900 to 800 block, we'd run into Naniwa Sukiyaki at 923, Kazuko Nakanishi and Paul Matsuda, Nakayoshi Sushi, 919 West Belmont, the Nakanishi family, Diamond Trading Company, which is Toguri Grocery. This was the grocery store arm of Jun Toguri, whereas J. Toguri Mercantile was an import dry goods shop. Fuji Beauty Salon at 909.5 West Belmont under Fujiko Miyazaki. The Japan Karate Association of Chicago is on the second floor of J. Toguri Mercantile Company, as well as was Choyokan Kendo Dojo under Mr. Yutaka Miyazaki. J. Toguri Mercantile Company was established in 1948 in the near north side resettlement enclave of Clark and Division. Relocated from Los Angeles by way of Gila River War Relocation Center, the Toguri family operated this store, as well as a neighboring grocery store called Diamond Trading. Both businesses relocated to Clark and Belmont from Clark and Division and ran 3 generations, closed in 2013. In the late evenings or early weekend mornings, a visitor might hear the stomps and spirit cries descending from the ceiling upstairs on the dojo run by Mr. Shojiro Sugiyama, whose Japan Karate Association of Chicago had moved into the second floor loft in 1972 and remained for 40 years. In 1979, Mr. Sugiyama assisted Mr. Yutaka Miyazaki in establishing his Choyokan Kendo Dojo in the same space. Mr. Toguri himself having been a founding advisor of the original Chicago Kendo Dojo in 1963. And the JK in Chicago now is at the Japanese Culture Center a couple blocks over, and Choyokan Kendo Dojo is located at Ravenswood United Methodist Church, as well as at the UIC campus and Des Plaines Park District. As we walk east toward Clark Street, on the corner, we would have George Sasimoto Dentistry at 3179 in the Bank Building, along with Barry Kato, MD. Going up the 3200 block, we'd have John Omori OD, 3206 North Clark, the Illinois Aikido Club, Norman Miyagi, John Omori, Anthony Muranaka, Sab Tanaka, Joe Takehara. Custom Cabinet Corporation at 3228 North Clark, John Okumura and Akio Ueda. Satsuki Restaurant and Lounge at 3231. York Superfood Market, Tom Hayashi and Helen Fukuda. Miyako Restaurant, we have Matsuya here. Carl and George Kita were brothers. Carl had a real estate agency and George was an attorney at law at 3248. So this was a pretty dense block of Japanese American businesses. Matsuya originated in the post-war resettlement enclave of Clark and Division at 1122 North Clark. Later settled in Lakeview at 3469. The restaurant changed hands a few times while maintaining a popular home-style menu and family ambiance. And 3469 was raised in 2010 to make way for a boutique hotel. Matsuya disappeared until 2012 when Shiroihana shut her 2 blocks down and Matsuya reopened in its place. This location has housed Japanese restaurants since the 1960s, beginning with Miyako Shokudo, and then Shiroihana, and now Matsuya. The Illinois Aikido Club was not a number on this map, but when we did the tour in 2019, Joe Takehara showed up, 88 years old, just Genki as all heck, did the mile walk, no problem. And he agreed to stop in front of the old Illinois Aikido Club and say a few words. So I just wanted to throw this in here. The Illinois Aikido Club was the Midwest's first dojo in 1961 by a group of neighborhood Nisei professionals looking for a cultural outlet to harmonize body and mind as they navigated the middle-aged stressors of career and family. Initially meeting privately in the matless basement of Chicago Police Detective Anthony Muranaka's home at 3324 North Clark, they later went to the storefront at 3223, which is the Royal Indian Grill behind Takehara Sensei across Clark Street there. And that was where they first were able to install foam flooring to absorb their break falls and rolls. And while they were in Mr. Muranaka's basement, they rolled around on a marble floor until they got hurt, and that was the end of training that day. So thank you to Takehara Sensei, who pre-pandemic was still teaching. He'll be 90 years old in April, and hopefully when all this business is over, he's going to be back on the mat at the Japanese American Service Committee in Uptown. And speaking of the JASC, Viking Hall at 3257 North Sheffield was the second home of the JASC, which originated as the Chicago Resettlers Committee in 1945. Built as a Viking temple in 1910 by the Independent Order of Vikings, this building harkens back to when Swedish Americans were the predominant ethnic group in the neighborhood. Following the migration of resettlers from Clark and Division, the Japanese American Service Committee moved its headquarters from 1110 North LaSalle in the Clark and Division neighborhood into Viking Hall in 1965. This was the site of numerous cultural classes, Sansei youth dances, as well as a practice space for the Nisei Ambassadors Drum and Bugle Corps. And some of you may recognize it. This building during the 1980s was also home to the infamous underage club called Medusas. Clark and Roscoe. So this was a pretty packed block. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but I did want to read a statement by a former resident, Fred Sasaki, who has a bullhorn in the upper left corner. Fred Sasaki is a Lakeview native. His family his father ran Berry Regent Dry Cleaners, which is still in the neighborhood and is still run by the Sasaki family. And Fred Sasaki said, "My family and I would eat at several restaurants in the area: Happy Sushi, Sanko, Matsuya, Nakayoshi, Fujiya, Yoshi's. A lot of my experience of Japanese American culture growing up was through food: white rice, chicken teriyaki, inari, and ramen at home, but also the wonderful foods we'd eat at the places noted. I was a fat kid, and food was fraught for me in general. And the Polish side of my family would belittle my Japanese. Say, you don't become Japanese from eating at Japanese restaurants. So I felt fraudulent for many years and distrusted my own experience and identification as a Japanese American as having no real or true cultural experience or validity. But there were many reasons why it was limited as such. Now, seeing how I pass down Japanese flavors, tastes, and experiences around food to my own children, I know that what I was told is not true. I am more Japanese for eating at Japanese restaurants, and so much has been passed down and transferred to me by literally eating Japanese culture. Those tastes and feelings always awoke a certain special inward part of me. Something about the experience always felt different and more familiar than a cheeseburger. And when I see my own children devour wakame or cold tofu, I recognize that it's in our blood and spirit, and a way that our culture was able to survive in America when other traditions, ceremonies, or celebrations may have been more difficult to sustain over the years. And it's with a heavy heart or angry stomach that I see the way those foods have been colonized by Whole Foods and sushi burritos, meaning not family. And I am grateful for those tastes and to see the culture survive in any way, but it's a simulacrum and at the whim of whatever the next phase or craze will be. Thank you, Fred Sasaki. And the 800, 900 block of North Newport or West Newport, this was a heavily concentrated block of Japanese American families. And I'd like to read one more thing by a former resident, the late Mary Okumura. Growing up in Lakeview during the 1960s, where there were so many Japanese American relocatees, provided a unique childhood experience. Because there were so many families that knew each other in some way or another, there was a sense of safety in that there was always someone, some neighbor or friend of the family who lived nearby. Like many Nisei, my father had a business in the neighborhood and knew many Japanese Issei and Nisei, first and second generation Japanese Americans, including the owners of the businesses along a strip of North Clark Street. Everyone seemed to know everyone else. This also provided a sense of self-policing, as none of us dared to do anything to bring shame upon our families. Social pressure was also instrumental in other areas. As a child, I remember my parents talking about a Nisei man who beat his wife. When he walked into Nisei Lounge, a popular hangout for many Nisei, everyone turned their backs to him and let him know that wife beaters were not welcome there and that he could return when he learned to treat his wife better. It was always nice to know that if you needed to stop to rest or you felt uncomfortable by someone following you, there were numerous Japanese-owned businesses on Clark Street where you could seek safe haven. Among this community, certain things were all known, that our families had been imprisoned for having Japanese ancestry. It was and still is a unique experience to grow up with, to question and to make sure this community that we shared experiences and cultural interests. I learned how to make grapefruit yokan from a neighbor. Others came over to our place to learn fine tailoring and fine baking from my mother. To some extent, this created a close community where we could grow up safely. Perhaps my favorite place to go is with my mother to Star Market, where the adults, Howard and Sara Hatanaka and Hayato and Toki Morikato, who owned the store, would always make me feel special just by saying hi. I really liked Howard because he'd always tease me in a cute way. Growing up in this type of community, many people were poor, having lost most of everything from incarceration. But for many of us Sansei, third generation Japanese Americans, the experience we received was rich, thanks to our parents' efforts. This allowed us to grow both in awareness and consciousness and to help us be stronger Americans. Thank you, Mary Okumura. And finally, we come to Lynx Hall, formerly owned by a couple Roland, a Nisei couple, Roland and Mei Joichi. Lynx Hall once housed a number of Japanese American businesses. Among them were Nisei Lounge, Hamburger King, Newport Cleaners, Kimura Sushi, and as a cultural organization, the Fujima-Ryu School of Japanese Classical Dance. Nisei Lounge remains as Wrigleyville's oldest bar, while Rice and Bread, the successor of Hamburger King, still serves up historic Chicago Nikkei favorites, such as the Octagawa, which is pictured below, and Yetkame is a noodle dish. So this concludes the tour. I sure hope that I didn't talk too loud. I hope that my internet didn't stall out. I hope you all heard me okay. At the end of the tour, when we had the real walking tour, we all went into Nisei Lounge and hung out and had a Q&A and a couple of beverages and a good time. So I hope you all had a good time learning about Chicago's historic Japantown with us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was really wonderful. And in the chat box, I did want to also share a link that Emma Saito Lincoln, who from the Japanese American Service Committee, suggested it's a really great resource to learn more about Japanese American communities in Chicago, and it features a lot of Eric's research. And I have to say that in doing some preparation for this meeting, everyone spoke so highly of your research, Eric, and everything you put together. So it's really amazing, and I hope you continue with your investigations and putting all those resources together for the new generation. We're going to have a chance that you'll be able to ask Eric questions at the end and throughout the event. I know there's a few that have popped up in the Q&A function. If you wanted to take a look at any of those, Eric, well, I'm introducing the next speaker, but we'll also have a chance at the end to talk a little bit more with Eric. So thank you again. So our next speaker, I'm very proud to present Dustin Henrich. He is the president of the Heartland JET Alumni Association. Dustin will be speaking about sister city relations in the Midwest and how to contribute to them. Dustin was an ALT in the JET program from 2012 to 2014 in Nosei-chu, Osaka, Japan, where he taught at 2 junior high schools. He currently lives in the Kansas City metro area in Missouri and has been serving as president of the Heartland JET Alumni Association since 2016. When he's not working during the day in information technology as a systems engineer, he spends his free time on the JET Alumni Association, volunteers as a committee member of the Independent Sister City Committee, is active in weightlifting and reading. Thank you so much, Dustin.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about sister city committees in the Midwest and how to contribute to them. In addition to working with the JET Alumni Association, I volunteer on a sister city committee in Independence, Missouri. I've been part of that committee for 2 years now, and we also actually have several other JETs that have came out of that group, as well as another JET alumni that volunteers as well. So that relationship is very close with the JET alumni community and the JET program. Okay, so why sister city committees? So sister city committees between the United States and Japan are a really important contributor to grassroots relationships. And the reason why I touch on grassroots relationships is that's very similar to what the JET program is. And not only is sister city committees good for JET alumni that come back, they're also good for students and families to be involved with Japan as well. It's also, I guess you could say, maybe like a precursor to the JET program for those that want to continue that relationship past their sister city committee. In addition to that, from the Japan side, having students come over, typically in my sister city, we have high school and college students come over for 2 weeks and they stay with the homestay family. It's all volunteer based, excuse me. And over the past several years, we've actually had some students come back and go to college in our local city and then eventually go to a 4-year university. And so you can see where over time that sister city relationship can help impact students as well as potentially create some of the, I guess you could say, an education and economic impact to between the two cities. Also, MIDI committees are looking for students to participate and volunteers to be committee members. You know, the sister city program's been around for a long time. Our sister city relationship, which I'll touch on more later, has been around for quite a while as well. Is always looking for host families and volunteers, and then we have a recruiting season for students. And then if you're not really close to a city that has a sister city program, you can always look at your state level as well. I'll be touching on that later. So a bit about my sister city. So it's between Independence, Missouri and Higashimotoyama, Tokyo. It was started in 1978, but the story how it started is really interesting. There was a group of Japanese tourists that were lost in Independence touring the Midwest. And while they were going through our what we call the square, which is kind of like our downtown, though Independence is pretty small, so it kind of looks like you step back in time to more of like the settler period. They were lost, and a family helped them. Well, this family happened to be part of the city committee and was able to host this family for a few days while they were able to figure out what they need to do to get to their next destination. And this Japanese family when they went back to Higashimurayama, they were so moved by the hospitality that they experienced. They went to their city and said, not only is this city the people are very nice, it's the hometown of President Truman. And we should continue to have these conversations with them. And the conversation just continued to roll from there. And so officially, the relationship started in 1978. Our two mayors signed the declaration of having a sister city relationship. And then the first student exchange started in 1981. And we've had students exchange ever since. Unfortunately, this past year, I believe, is the first year we have not had an exchange of some sort, whether it's adult delegations or student delegations. And so, and it's looking like with 2021, that may possibly be put on hold as well. And the student exchange between our two sister cities isn't just staying with the host family. It's for the Japanese students to be able to experience what Midwestern life is like, as well as the American students that go over to Higashimurayama. They get to not just see the tourist sites, but they also get to see what Japanese school life is like. They go to the elementary, middle, and high school. They get to do a variety of different traditional activities, different cooking classes. And so they get a pretty holistic experience between the two cities. And then in addition to going over to Japan, over the past several years, since we've had more JET alumni involved with the sister city relationship, we've been able to create culture classes, language prep classes, and then help grow our local festival. It was our local festival, it used to be called the Cherry Blossom Festival. And now we've developed a new farmers market called the Uptown Market, and it's called the Uptown Matsuri. And so we host that every single year. Of course, last year we were not able to. And so that's able to help promote the culture, Japanese culture in our city as well. So how do sister cities contribute to grassroots relationships? Whoops. So like I said, what I mean by grassroots relationships is those basic people-to-people conversations that happen like between a host family and their student, whether in Japan or the United States. And so it's where that relationship starts. And so like I was mentioning, we started with that, over the past 45 years, we've had this relationship between our two cities. Whether it's your city, my city, that could develop into quite a bit more. For example, like I said, we have Japanese students that are now attending our local community colleges. We've discussed, like our committee is all volunteers, we've discussed with our city, how can we influence or have a more of a Japanese influence at our community colleges. And so they're looking at having discussions with the administration there on creating scholarship programs. And so based on this conversation, it's just kept growing and growing and growing. So one of the other things that JET alumni bring to the table is they've already been able to know how to foster friendships and understanding by participating in Japan and the JET program. And so even though the exchanges are brief, the impact during that short stay developed friendships that have lasted a long time. These local relationships can continue on for generations. So for example, with my sister city, they've been able to create these multi-generational relationships. There's committee members that have hosted kids or their kids' kids from Japan, and likewise, American students going over there. And so we've also had students from Japan who they had such a good experience with our sister city relationship. They told their friends about it, and then they had siblings come over. And so we've had almost entire family stay with the same American family over the course of several years. And one of the good example of that is Tracy Whiting Kipper is a JET alumni on the committee who hosted two sisters from the same family. And one of them ended up becoming a full-time college student here in Independence. And then because she had such a good relationship during those 10 days with Tracy's family. So how can you contribute to that? So many committees are looking on to pass on the torch. They're looking for somebody who has time and interest in Japan. You don't necessarily have to have the language experience or the language knowledge. In fact, most of the time, most of the time when Japanese students come over, they're not wanting to see how we live or how we can show what it's like to have Japan here in the United States. They want to see what it's like to be here in the United States. And so we want to try to immerse them in English as much as possible. And so, of course, when we work with our Japanese counterparts, especially online, we want to try to find that common ground of language as well. But it does help to have language skill, whether you can speak or read or write or interpret or translate. And if you're a JET alumni, you very much bring a lot of value already. But if you've never been to Japan, don't let that turn you away from, that's a good way to start developing that skill set and developing that exposure to Japanese language and culture. So like I said, here are some of the things that JETs bring to the table. You've already have experience with local cities, language skills, translation, interpretation skills, culture understanding, event planning, being flexible, especially with every situation is different, and education experience. So one of the big things that committees need is someone that is willing to give their time to either host or plan events. We're always struggling to find host families or someone who has time when the Japanese students come over. Because usually we need someone to be able to take time, at least for one day, to take time out and either plan an event, like for example, one thing that we take the Japanese students on is horseback riding. Another one is recently, axe throwing has become very popular. That was something new that they got to experience. Being able to create a planned event where they can tour not just the tourist events, but also have things to do. And then if you have never done any of this before, there are networks to get you started. So for example, if you don't have a sister city, or if you don't know, contact your city hall to see if one has already exists or if they have a requirements list. Some cities already have a charter of some sort of like if there's going to be a sister city, not necessarily not just with Japan, but with other countries, like these are the basic requirements that they may have. So you want to make sure to see if they have that. They may not. Or they already have a sister city relationship and it just gone dormant. And if you express interest, they may already have the resources ready to provide that, because typically sister city relationship committees are volunteer. They're not paid by the city. But if your city does not have one, on the next slide, I'll show you some different resources to help you get started, as well as if one's completely inactive. So there's the Sister City International Organization. They do, for established sister cities, you can pay a membership fee and get a variety of different benefits from them. But you also can use their search function. Let's see, so Missouri. So you can see here, you can scroll down, and every single one of these cities has a sister city relationship already established. So just by typing in my state, I can see all the sister city relationships. Some of these may be dormant. So like, let's go to Illinois. Let's see, there we go. So looks like Illinois has several. So, and if your town doesn't have one, you might look at to see if there's one close to you. You still might be able to be active. You may not need to be a resident of that city. And so if you're interested in establishing a sister city, you can essentially put your city on the quote marketplace, and there's an application form here. And this will pretty much takes all the details of your city, and the sister city organization will try to find something that's in comparable value or in comparison, because you don't want, say, a giant metro city in one country and a really small city or town, because that wouldn't be necessarily a great match. You want to try to find somewhere a happy medium between the two. And so this is one way to get started. If you're still wanting to look, you can also look, this is just for the United States. I didn't look to see what is international. Typically sister cities tends to be a United States program. You can search here by state. I find that this isn't the most recent information, but I have found a few in Missouri that wasn't in other places. I would probably start here first. And then if you've put your city on the marketplace per se, and you're still struggling finding a similar city in Japan, this is a great resource. The people at Claire are more than eager to help you get started. And these links will be provided. I'll send these to JETAA Chicago for distribution. People at Claire will be more than happy to give you assistance. And so I'm not going to necessarily read all this information here, but through JETAA, we work with Claire sometimes daily. And so they're a great resource. At the same time, if you want to find your local consulate, these are the different consular offices throughout the United States that can also help with a sister city relationship as well. So most likely I'd probably start with Claire first. And then if for some reason, or if you wanted to work with both resources, you'd be more than welcome to. So, okay. All right, well, thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you so much, Dustin. That was a really amazing presentation with a lot of wonderful information. I actually owe my placement in JET to a sister city program. I think a lot of people know that Chicago and Osaka are sister cities, but there's also smaller ones, as you showed when you typed in Illinois, and one that came up was Schaumburg, Illinois. And I did not live in Schaumburg, but they liked people from the Chicago area in my town in Toyama Prefecture in Amerikawa. It's a very small seaside city. So they placed always Chicago area people in Amerikawa City. And I know the mayor sometimes went to Schaumburg and talked about the great steak that he ate. So yeah, it was always heartwarming to see the connection that my small city had with another suburban Chicago city. So great. So our next speaker, this will be the final speaker of the night before we open it up to a broader discussion, is Jo Oyama Miller. Jo is board president of Madison Obihiro Sister Cities. She will be speaking on sharing things with our sister city. Jo was born and raised in Chicago. Her parents and siblings were sent to Chicago for resettlement after their internment at Rower, Arkansas in 1944. She grew up near Old Town Chicago and knew the area known as Japantown very well. She left Chicago to attend the University of Wisconsin-Madison in September 1964 and has lived there since 1968. She's married to Mark Miller, a retired Air National Guard pilot and longtime Wisconsin legislator. They have 3 adult children. Jo is very active in both Madison politics and the Madison community. She was a community economic developer for 13 years and has owned and operated her own companies for many years. She has been board president for Madison Obihiro Sister Cities Incorporated for over 10 years, as well as serving on a variety of nonprofit organizations. She and her husband have also been sponsors for over 20 high school and post-secondary students from Japan. So thank you very much, Jo.
Okay, thank you very much. As I've told you before, my name is Jo Oyama Miller, and I'm the board president for Madison Obihiro Sister Cities, Inc. And I want to say thank you very much for this opportunity to share things about our organization, its priorities and best practices to encourage strong Japanese American ties between countries, cultures, and people. As I mentioned before, my background started in this very city of Chicago, as my parents and my siblings were released from Aurora, Arkansas in the internment camp in late 1944. My father was a Methodist minister and became very active in establishing the Japanese community and his church in Chicago. His church, known as the Japanese Church of Jesus Christ, was the first to buy its own building in 1945, and at one point was the largest Christian church in Chicago. He was instrumental in creating Heiwa Terrace, the Mutual Aid Society, and was an active member for JSC and JECL. So as you can see, my roots start right here in Chicago, but it spread to Madison, Wisconsin, where I went to enter the university in 1964, and I never left. On an island far away from Madison is a place called Hokkaido. And there is a city known as Obihiro, which is located at 43 degrees north, which is the same as Madison, Wisconsin. In fact, the former representative, Soichi Nakagawa, wondered who would his city be sister cities with. And he literally took his finger from Obihiro and across the Pacific Ocean to a town in the US and found out that it was Madison, Wisconsin. Obihiro is nestled between two mountain ranges, and it's known for its blue skies, pristine waters, and clean air. And these natural attributes created an abundance of agricultural products that Obihiro and Tokachi, the county area, became known as the breadbasket for Japan. It is home to a growing agricultural and international community. It's the site of the famous Obihiro Veterinary and Agricultural School, and is famous for its farms, its lakes, and its beauty, similar to Madison. It is also unique for the very unique style of horse racing called Banye-e, the only type of horse racing of this nature left in the world. It's also known for its food, such as butadon, the natural cheeses, and pastries. Obihiro is the headquarters of the three most nationally known bakeries in Japan, Rokate, Rugetsu, and Royce, and is the headquarters of the 5th Division of the Northern Army of the Japan Ground Defense Force because of its location so close to Russia. Madison Obihiro Sister Cities officially began in 2006 and is one of 9 sister cities from Arcatao, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Cuba, Germany, Canafig de Gambia, our newest, Mantova, Italy, Obihiro, Tapatalan, and Vilnius, Lithuania. Since its inception, its focus has been on children and children exchanges, mental health, wellness, and people-to-people projects. While we are one of the newest sister cities, we are also one of the busiest. We have 4 to 6 delegations a year prior to COVID who came over to study agriculture, mental health, business, and children and student exchanges. We share so many similarities that when you travel to each other's city, it just feels like home. We have cows, dairy in particular. We have similar agricultural products such as potato, beets, wheat, clean lakes and rivers, university, parks, business centers, which makes each of our cities sisters in so many ways. One of the most unique features is how many children. We've had over 150 come to study and have host family experiences, similar to what Justin talked about. We have a very special relationship with one of Obihiro city-sponsored high schools. Since 2006, we have received 5 to 8 students every year to come and live and experience the high schools. These exchanges have led to friendships, marriages, and a greater desire to return and study either English, agriculture, or other subjects at our universities. We have now several students who have graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in both undergraduate and graduate programs. We also have a memorandum of understanding between Obihiro Veterinary and Agricultural School and Madison's College of Agriculture, where annual exchanges between these students, faculty, and research are held every year. In fact, Obihiro University wanted to be sure that students from Madison would come, that all classes are now taught in English. This association between research started after World War II, when many farmers were sent to Wisconsin farms to train, study, and apprentice to rebuild the dairy and cheese industries in Japan. ABS, one of our Dane County's favorite and famous agriculture companies, even set up a site in Obihiro to help with this project. And Obihiro is the only off-site location for this company. One of our deepest relationships is our mental health study groups. Every year since 2004, 8 to 10 professionals come to study and learn the Madison model of community mental health. Through this study tour, MOC, we introduced the concept of community outreach programs, the recovery model, peer support, and peer specialist certification. But most importantly, how to minimize hospitalization for the mentally challenged. We have exchanged teams between Obihiro and Madison and helped them create the establishment of what we call the Assertive Community Program, or ACT. Through these dialogues and exchanges, numerous ACT teams are now established throughout Japan with the assistance of the National Institute of Mental Health. We have exchanged speakers at conferences to help set up and address each unique set of mental health challenges and to institute policy changes. In 2019, we were invited by the North ACT team in Sapporo to speak at their annual conference. In addition, we have worked with students from Todai, Satori, and other universities to study a variety of mental health concepts and concerns. And we have trained and spent time with the forensic, the voluntary, and involuntary mental health organizations throughout Japan. Another great opportunity was Obihiro City sent an operational task force in Madison to study and review environmental policies and procedures after Obihiro was declared one of Japan's top 10 environmental cities. This team studied bicycle paths, park development, bike paths, rain and rooftop gardens to help with rainwater runoff. In 2007, our mayor attended the Ice Festival and saw firsthand how Obihiro addressed urban sprawl by the planting of 1 million trees to create the Millennium Forest starting in 1974. Since that time, the forest, now known as Obihiro no Mori, has created recreational space, eliminated urban sprawl, and better air quality. Both cities have a focus on green industries, and we've worked together to share our ideas and programs. Obihiro has one of the most pristine rivers, the Satsuna, within its city borders, and has been declared by the Japanese government 8 times as the cleanest Class A river. The city even bottles the water from the Satsuna and sells it as a city commodity. Both Madison and Obihiro have a full array of winter wonderland activities, which we advertise to one another, such as ice festivals, ice fishing, the kite festival. Another area of common concern is food safety and food production. Obihiro has been very interested in the development of Madison's University Research Park and how it works together with the university to assist the professors to create their own businesses that can utilize this research. Obihiro is now doing similar programs with its close relationship with the Tokachi Foundation and Obihiro's JETAA or JETAA Training Center. In addition to all of the above, MOSC is happy to assist any student who comes to Madison, as well as those individuals who come to work with Japanese companies, particularly through our mayor's offices. In conjunction with the Madison Japan Association and the local and its programs and services, MOSC assisted our local opera company with promoting a new and modern production of Madden Butterfly, along with a unique Japanese set design. We've sponsored contemporary artists from Obihiro with art exhibits in Madison and in Chicago. And in addition, we've had close relationships because of our board, which is volunteer, to help participate in an array of community events like the International Festival, the support of a local typical group called Benny Daiko. We also have supported the organizations from the university called WOA, the Wisconsin Association of Asian Americans, and POA, the Professional Organizations of Asian Americans. We've created through the JET alumni what we call a chatterers group, where they continue to speak and practice in their Japanese. With this dedicated board of directors, we have been able to be an active community member as well as a supporting collaborator with other organizations. Citizens from both cities have experienced all seasons of the year with one another, from onsens, farmers markets, yatai, banie, concerts on the square, Halloween, voting. The past 15 years have taught us to better appreciate each other and what our citizens can contribute and show each other. Sister Cities programs are developed to exchange ideas, develop personal relationships and collaborations in all walks of life. This sister city does it well because of the great support it receives from our community. So I hope that this summary has provided you with a wide array of activities and programs that can be introduced in each of your communities. And I look forward to helping you in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was a wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
I really love the visual element and the diversity of ways that your sister city program has connected it, from the mental health services to the environmental aspect to the agriculture aspect. That's amazing to see that diversity of connections that you've been able to build.
And I think it's because we have such a strong connection with the universities, and one of the requirements that we hold regarding sister cities is that each city must have a core organization already developed with some kind of connection. So, and then that is strong so that it is sustainable. So we've now had, I'm the third board president, and I've been the longest out of the 15 years, but it also helps us because we have this core group of people that continue to serve on our board and to help us. And OB Hero has the same. And it's not just people that come in periodically. They're dedicated to developing it.
Great, thank you again. So the next portion of our event, I really want to thank again our three wonderful speakers. We really hope that you learned about the various aspects of Japan in the Midwest and ways you can continue to maintain those ties, and a little bit about the history as well. We are now going to transition to our question and answer session that will be facilitated by myself, our Vice President, Zara Espinoza, and our Outreach Coordinator, Dylan Kofi. So thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Lara. I did also want to share a brief poll that you could answer anonymously as we're beginning to answer questions. This just helps us see, what part of the event was successful, where we could perhaps have improved, and gauge interest in perhaps a follow-up event in the future. So I'm going to activate that now. It's an anonymous poll. And if you are able to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. You should see it on your screen just about now. And once again, it is anonymous, so please answer as freely as you wish. And I will be sending a Google or a follow-up Google survey, as well as all of the information that was shared in the chat, some of the resources, so that you'll have that for references and for future discussions, perhaps. So now thank you again, Lara and Dylan, for helping me facilitate this question and answer session. A lot of this is based on some of the thoughtful pre-submitted questions and guest lists. So we're going to try our best to incorporate those questions into this session, and then we will open it up again. Please continue to use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask any of your questions. So Lara, would you mind kicking us off for some of the questions that were geared a little bit more towards Eric's presentation?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Sheila. And again, thank you everyone for being here, and a big oskare-sama deshita to our panelists and my fellow organizers, including USJETAA and Sasakawa's support here with Bahia and Shanti. With that said, Eric, we got a couple of pre-submitted questions that kind of covered the same thing over and over again, because I used to live in the Lakeview area, or more so in the queerest area, the Boys Town area of Chicago, which is right in the Lakeview area. So a lot of people were curious of like, okay, if there's the history of the historic Japantown being there, why the shift over to the suburbs so much? I know you might have touched maybe a little bit on this, but was it with that shift to the suburbs, which for those of you who are been in Illinois, there's a big market out in Arlington Heights, Illinois called Mitsuwa. There's a lot of Japanese businesses out in that area, like the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And so curious if you could answer that question, and then I might have a quick little follow-up with it.
Sure. I would say that the answer is twofold. One is that for the Japanese American community that resettled in Chicago, a lot of the businesses that were there and the residents, the Nisei that came to Chicago started small professionals, and a lot of those kids moved out of the neighborhood. Not all of them. There are a number of them that stayed in the neighborhood. In fact, I see among the participants, Michael Tanimura is a second generation Lakeview resident with 2-3 generations still living in this building. So they kind of moved out. The other thing is that they're in the northwest suburbs surrounding O'Hare Airport are a number of Japanese companies where business people come for a couple years at a time as stayovers. They have the Futabakai school there where the business people send their children so that they can maintain their education up to Japan standards for when they return, so they won't be totally lost. The mega markets open up there. You have Mitsuwa Market, you have Tensuke Market. And so those two communities, and I saw another question earlier, those two communities have historically been pretty separate. So we have the resettlement community, and then we have the business community. And lately, especially with the Nikkei community picnics over the summer, usually in August, so find some relation between the new Japanese immigrants versus people like me that descend from early 1900s immigration. And it can sometimes be a funny thing because people like myself and perhaps, like Joe, we may have some traditions and ways of being that are just completely out of whack for modern Japanese people coming to the United States. And they say, wow, man, you're so old fashioned, So I would say, I'm sorry.
I was also going to add, in addition to that, is that what happened to some of the original Japantown, like Clarkin Division and even Lakeview, the neighborhood changed. Clarkin Division became very, very African-American, much lower income. The schools were not as strong or as good. And so the Japanese kept moving to those areas where education was very, very strong. And as those suburban schools became known in Skokie and Evanston for strong programs, families normally and other businesses, they just began that migration as well. So with the changes in neighborhood, particularly where I grew up with my father's church on the near north side outside of Old Town, when Cabrini Green was built and things like that, the neighborhood changed dramatically. And in the part of South Chicago with the Robert Crown housing, that changed that dramatic neighborhood as well, and people began to look for new places to go. They also liked the fact that they could buy homes because all of the people living in those original Japantown were in apartments or tenement style buildings, and they wanted green space. They wanted a little bit more, and so I think it was a natural migration as their economy and their income improved.
No, thank you so much. And you actually both answered my follow-up question about ways it's staying engaged and because of the shift. So Sheila, I defer to you for the next question.
Great. Thank you. Dylan, would you mind going next with the question that we had that was directed towards Dustin about ways he maintains his experience in Japan in his current position?
Yeah, definitely. So Dustin, one of the questions that we had was like, how do you use your experiences that you gained in Japan here in the United States? Like, how do you use it, whether that be, you know, in your personal life or work or your volunteering or whatnot? How do you use your experiences?
Okay, yeah. So when I was in ALT on JET, I had a couple different schools and I had, 5 or 6 teachers. But then in addition to that, we had this ebb and flow of different volunteers. So our core team, so to speak, was always changing. And it seems like that I was always having to adjust, like, I don't know, every 6 months or so, not necessarily with the JT or the Japanese teacher of English, but more of a with the assistants that we had, and you know whether or not how many resources we'd have, how that translated to what I do now. I've been shifted around to different teams, and it was a very interesting perspective because I didn't, you know, it was my first corporate job here in the United States. And I've shifted teams quite a bit, and people get moved around depending on what needs to be done. And so being able to adjust to those different dynamics and being able to create a strong group, because the work I do in IT, healthcare IT, we do need to have a strong group so what we know what everybody's doing, because we're always touching multiple different places within a hospital. And so you need to have that strong group dynamic. And so being able to adapt quickly to different personalities, you know, because like on JET, you also have your JTEs that change every 2 to 3 years. You need to be able to adjust to that. And that happens so frequently, even though I was there for 2 years, it happens so frequently throughout the year. That really helped me with my current work I do now. In terms of like the volunteering work with the Sister City program, I would say JETAA has translated really well there because of the different connections that I've developed through JETAA, whether it's with different JET alumni or just experience with event planning with JET Alumni Association, and then also helping develop the Alumni Association even more. The Sister City program I joined, they didn't really have an alumni association, so that over the past couple of years, that's something that we've been developing to help create a pool of not only potential committee members as committee members change out, because it'd be great to have every committee member that's hosted and gone over, and to say that, oh yeah, they've been a committee member as well. It creates a really strong core. And so that's something that's been able to translate, being able to create like the skill set with MailChimp, if you want something like a technical skill set. That's translated really well to the Sister City program. So in fact, I think there was a Facebook thread, I can't remember which group, JET group it was on. It was someone asked what skills from JETAA have translated to other areas in your life. And I would say a lot of the event, I never really did event planning. I mean, yeah, I did classroom planning on JET, but on JETAA, that kind of stepped up with some of the events that we've had to do, like our film festival, and, you know, and social media campaigns, being able to run, like I said, MailChimp, ad management and stuff like that. That has gradually been translating over to how can I teach people that in the Sister City committee.
That's really cool. Yeah, like the JET experience and then that going directly into JETAA coming back is just all about versatility. So that's really, yeah, really cool to see you using those fundamental skills that you gained both on JET and then JETAA, and then transporting it into both work and your personal life. So thank you very much for sharing. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Dylan, I wanted to add something to it. Is our first JET who was in Obihiro prior to when we started Sister City, she went into the city government and encouraged them to hire either JETs or students studying Japanese. So since 2004, the city of Obihiro hires 2 individuals for a maximum of 3 or 5 years on special occasions as employees. And they could either
Wow.
be JAAs or have graduated from the University of Wisconsin or University of Milwaukee or any of the schools that teach Japanese. And then I interview them and make recommendations. And then the other person that is hired is the English liaison at the city-sponsored high school to help the English as a second language program. And that position is available with full benefits, just like a Japanese employee. And that has really helped us develop stronger relationships, but also gives opportunities for the Jets. And we encourage them whenever there's a position that's opened to be able to do. And it really was just one Jet person going in and saying, well, how about keeping this going? You know, so maybe other Jet AAs may want to think about that.
Thank you very much, Dylan, Dustin, and Joe. So the next question we had that was pre-submitted, Joe, that we have two questions for you. One was asking about if you could talk a little bit more about connections between Midwest agriculture in Japan. And Dustin or Eric, feel free to add in if you had any comments as well. And then Joe, the second question was in the Q&A box, we have a person asking if they can contact you later to find out more about the mental health study groups and how we could learn about those. The person has a college student they advise in a mentorship grant program who is Japanese American and is interested in research in mental health. Would we be able to share your contact info?
Absolutely.
Great.
One of the ways that we have worked regarding the agriculture is I've worked very closely with our Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, and also Madison is host to the World Dairy Expo, which is the largest agricultural commercial exposition, and it's been around for 18 years, and Obihiro sends a delegation to learn about that all the time, and also to learn about new companies and new products. Most recently, the Department of Agriculture was going to host an exhibit for the Holstein show, which was going to be in Sapporo this last year, but because of COVID, they were no longer able to do. But we really worked to help find what are the needs for export and import between products. And that's one of the things the Chamber of Commerce came back and said to us, you know, we have a lot of these agricultural products, and both in how can we start to do different things? And some of it we can do locally between our cities, but it turned out that it was much better to do them within the state. And so most recently, I've been working with the contact person at the Department of Ag to look at trade missions. And we picked key companies to find counterparts in Japan. And then with the Alumni Association, they're able to, and the JET who remained in Japan, to help as translators and interpreters and develop this program. And so we've been really, really fortunate. We're also finding new products. It's not just beet and wheat or whatever, but Wisconsin is the best ginseng in the world. Unfortunately, China's been buying it and selling it as Chinese ginseng. And so the Wisconsin ginseng farmers discovered that, and they've really been putting up a whole international trade agreement of making sure that products developed in different states and products are protected by the US, and also Japan recognizes that. So we've been able to do it on a variety of levels, from local, of bringing in small products, as well as statewide. And I'd be glad to share information with that individual as well. And the same thing is that the individual interested in the study groups or programs that we do, she can contact me by my email personally or through the Madison Obihiro Sister City email. And we continue to do these study groups all the time. And they tell us what they want to learn. I work with the university. I work with the mental health institute, as well as the consumers or the individuals with mental health disabilities, that they can also go to Japan and do presentations and meet one another, people to people.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Dustin or Eric, did you want to add anything about the any agriculture connections? Okay, no worries. Okay, no worries. So Laura, would you mind asking our next question that is for all the panelists?
Yeah, this was a pre-submitted question, so thank you very much. And yes, please keep bringing your live questions in through the Q&A box. We do record them, so if anything, if you don't get your question answered today, either manually by a speaker or a panelist now, or one of us, we're happy to share those with the speakers afterwards, and you feel free to reach out to them as well. One question that we had submitted previously was, what do you see as the largest issues for the Midwest Nikkei community today? And what we can do and expand on that, you know, I'm a Nikkei person, I am half Japanese, but also like, you know, for people who are not too, like people who are involved in the US Japan community, what do you see as some of the largest issues? And also, how do you think we can overcome them or steps to take? Anyone can hop in at any time.
Well, I guess I'll just jump in. I think one of the things is, as I addressed earlier, is a connection between descendants of turn of the 20th century immigrants connecting with new Japanese immigrants. Now, we don't have necessarily the language, and we don't necessarily have the same culture, but we'd still like to connect to one another as a global family. And I think as far as people of my generation, maybe one of the things is that there is no geographic kind of center of culture. And so it's pretty easy for us as generations go on to just assimilate, kind of forget it happened and move forward.
No, thank you. And you can never forget your history. Like I work in like HR and diversity, equity, inclusion, and so many people, sometimes even some of the more unglamorous and really tough and difficult parts of our history, especially as Americans, is really hard to come by and really hard to grapple with. But it's not until we, you know, acknowledge them, learn about them, ask questions, dive deeper, and relate it to our current day and our current lives, both independently and as a community, can we move forward. Dustin and Joe, especially because all three of you are just so different too. Do you have anything to add?
Yes. Well, one of the things that I do regularly is here in Wisconsin, the third grade educational curriculum, this country, one of the countries you study is Japan. And so I really make sure that I make contact with those elementary schools and those teachers to ask them if there's something that we can do to help educate and to do these fun kinds of things, and bringing in discussions and materials, and teaching them how to use chopsticks, and when, you know, and how to eat from a rice bowl, and just simple things that I know kids are really interested in. And then to be able to keep making sure that we have the international festival, we make sure that we access it with our Taiko group, our Japanese language school, and we do a lot with the hafu, or the children of mixed relationships, that are becoming much more populous, not just here in America, but in Japan. So my grandchildren recognize that in Japan, that sometimes they get bullied because they're hafu. And even though Japanese is their #1 language, they keep saying how come. And so we have to keep on educating and getting them to feel comfortable in whatever skin they are. And I think this is where programs like JET and Sister Cities really are important, and that we extend ourselves individually first and always.
I would say, just to end with what Joe said, what we do, considering that we don't really have a really large Japanese economic footprint here in Kansas City, so therefore the Japanese community is pretty small, but not only is that community pretty small, everybody pretty much supports each other, knows each other. I'd say we try to do a pretty good job of making sure that the culture, Japanese culture, education and language education is accessible. There for a while in the Kansas City, Missouri metro area, it seemed like Japanese education was becoming less and less accessible, like as high schools faded it out. And a lot of the JET alumni, as well as Japan America Society members, have did a really good job over the past 10, 20 years, making sure that either if high schools weren't having the Japanese language classes or the culture classes, that we had more volunteer opportunities, whether it's the weekend class or making sure that the culture festivals continue to grow and not just one type of Japanese culture, but starts showing multiple facets of Japanese culture. So that way that exposure is there to help educate the, I guess you could say, natives of Kansas City metro area.
No, thank you so much. All of you. Oh, no, go on. go, Jim.
My other comment, Lara, was that in Japan, when I'm in Japan, I also talk about relationships and bring individuals over. So I brought over Japanese and African Americans. And now that Naomi is so popular, that is helpful because the Japanese have always had some discrimination of those who are less than beautiful by their standards, or the combinations of who's acceptable to mix with the Japanese blood and languages and things like that. And that's been really helpful as we talk about that and get them to understand that the Japanese also has to make changes in their society because they've been so homogeneous for so long. And so I get excited when I hear one of my Jets or whatever marrying a Japanese person and starting a new community in Obihiro, with different traditions. So it's been interesting.
Oh, I'm just like speechless, which is hard to make me be. No, that's amazing. Thank you for all those very different but yet similar perspectives of that. What I could catch from it is that we need to know our history. We need to connect through generations. Like, age is just a number to an extent. It's about where we go and how we deal with things and how we do it together, along with holding each other, accountable for how change happens moving forward and being a part of that, along with being aware of what we're offering and what's being consumed out there, whether it be literally through your tummy, like sushi, or through also just the content you consume about Japan. I know I didn't even get exposed to Japanese culture till I went to college because I came from a small town in Michigan. So that has a big effect. So thank you all. Sheila, I know we're getting to the end of the program.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I just really wanted to thank everyone for their time on this Thursday evening, especially our panelists for sharing their unique insight. I hope we could give them a virtual round of applause or use the little emoji function on Zoom. So as I mentioned, this was our first webinar in a series that is, we're thankful to be supported by Sasakawa USA and USJETAA. We will have a second one that is Laura is spearheading sometime in February. So Laura, if you wanted to give us a brief overview of that, and then we will close out the night. And if anyone has in the chat any other tips about maintaining connections in the US, Japan, or any other resources, we will be collecting them and I'll share them in a follow-up email to the members so that you have a record of that. And thank you again, everyone.
Yeah, really quick, because I know we're 34 minutes after the hour. So just really quick, everyone, as we wrap up things up, speakers, please stay on the call before people leave. But before you leave, I'm going to put in the chat ways to stay in touch with JETAA Chicago, all our socials and the things. And also, most importantly, the first link is to sign up for our newsletter. Right now, JETAA Chicago, along with Sasukawa USA and USJETAA, have been really pumping out some good programming, including this webinar. And we're continuing our second webinar that has been supported by Sasakawa and USA and USJETAA, probably sometime mid-February, probably the week of the 18th, again, to be determined, but sign up for our newsletter to make sure that you find out when it is, because we will announce it through there. And it's going to be a webinar that, similar to what Joe was talking about, where it's about mixed identity. It's about multitudes of identity, and not just through, being Japanese or not. We're going to see it through the lens of mixed multiracial Japanese people. But we're going to be talking about intersectionality, which if you want to find out what that word means, Google it, or come in to our webinar. We're going to dive in and use that framework of intersectionality, of how different aspects of your identity can impact one another, and thinking about how that relates to the world that we live in, both in the US, Japan, and community, both in Japan itself, because so many of our speakers would have been in Japan, and living here in the Midwest and the US and beyond. And so it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a presentation along with a deep discussion panel full of some really diverse voices, not just in race, but age, generation, economic status, and everything more. So I think something that everyone can relate to. So, and yes, I see people putting their things like their LinkedIn's in the chat. So it's good to connect, but that's going to be our next webinar, which is going to be in February sometime. So please subscribe to our newsletter so you know, or follow us on social so you know when it's about to go on.
Thank you again, everyone. I hope you have a good night.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And we're waving to you as you exit, and then speakers. Maybe I'll just turn on some music, who knows? Thank you.